Hey everybody, my name is Terry Kerr. I am an executive coach and empowerment strategist with the Unstuck Duck Coaching. Welcome to my podcast video interview series. So today, this is where I showcase the stories of extraordinary survivors who've made the conscious choice to pivot and thrive. So today I have with me Sandy Gunn from Vancouver, BC. Thank you for coming, Sandy.
Thanks for having me.
Sandy and I first met when I volunteered at Royal Roads University for her capstone week, which was when you go through the executive coaching program at Royal Roads, they have a capstone week where everybody gets together after doing the program for 9 months or 8 months or some feels like forever. And they come back and do their panel exam type of ideas and have an alumni panel. And I was on that alumni panel. So we got to know each other a little bit. We found out we had some similar stories, and I'm just super excited to get to know you a little bit better today. So thanks for coming on. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Carrie.
Okay, so we're just going to get started, and tell me a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, your family, where you live now. Tell us about you.
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, I am from Vancouver, BC. I grew up actually just in a suburb outside of Vancouver called Burnaby, and didn't really stray that far from Burnaby for the first probably 25 years of my life. Worked in Burnaby, went to school in Burnaby, like at SFU and BCIT. Yeah, pretty much lived in Vancouver my whole life, other than a short stint in Dublin, Ireland for 3 months about 13 years ago. So that was it's another story altogether. I, like you, I'm also a certified executive coach, did the Royal Roads program with you. And I've spent, I guess professionally, I've spent most of my career, 20 plus years, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm saying that out loud, in the human resources space, mostly in financial services and technology. And I've recently made a change to go out on my own, which I'm sure we'll get into in a little bit here. And yeah, on the fun side, I've got a dog. His name is Odie. He's not in this video right now because he would be a huge distraction. And what else? I love to read. I love crossword puzzles. I love to box. That's a bit about me.
Right on. Awesome. I have a dog too. Her name is Indy, and she is not allowed in here when I'm on the camera either.
Yeah.
Because she's currently at about 45 pounds and she's almost 6 months. So she's a big loaf, big, bounding energy. So yes, this is, so Burnaby is just outside Vancouver. I think most people that'll be watching this will know where that is, but so you went to SFU and BCIT. What did you take it?
Yeah. When I was at SFU, I thought I was going to be a teacher. That was my goal, when I was in elementary school and high school. And then probably 3 years in, I started volunteering at an elementary school, and I was like, I don't know, 18 years old, 19 years old. I'm like, I am not old enough to be influencing young children. So I made a bit of a shift, and I decided just to finish my degree in psychology, and then I went to BCIT and did the HR program there.
Okay, awesome. So tell me, one of the things that we have in common and the reason that you're here today is that you are also a cancer survivor. So tell me, one thing that I know is that we all have a cancer story. And one of the things that I found was it became a bit rote, like we can tell the story from start to finish, kind of exactly how that happened. So tell me a bit about your cancer story.
Sure. So it was just, late 2016, November-ish. I was actually on a business trip in Toronto, and I don't know what it was. Like, I am not a self-checker. I would go for regular mammograms. I just had a mammogram that year, so it's not something that I would really think to do. And I was just lying in bed one night, and I had my phone in front of me, and there's kind of this reflection off of my skin. I don't know what it was. I looked down, I'm like, is that something there? I just put my hand down, I'm like, that feels like something. It was just so random. And so I don't know, I just had this gut feeling. So I contacted my doctor while I was in Toronto, and I was like, hey, I need to come in when I'm back. So I had an appointment as soon as I came back, and she was like, yeah, we should get this checked out. So I went for another mammogram and an ultrasound and a biopsy. And then January 23rd, 2017, I was diagnosed. And it was such a weird day. You know, my partner was out of town that day, and I was like, oh, I'm sure it'll be fine. But I brought one of my girlfriends with me, and so we went to the doctor's office, and I was like, okay, just wait out here. I'll only come get you if it's bad news. And then I got into the doctor's office, and she's like, oh, this is the kind of message. I'm like, I'm going to stop you right there. Can I go get my friend? And she's like, yes. So I go get my friend. Anyway, this isn't exactly how it happened, but this is how I like to remember it happening. So she tells me the news. Well, no, actually, so my friend, she's lovely, and she's really, just from a aesthetic point of view, she's very edgy and trendy and cool. And every time we're out traveling or wherever, people always comment on her hair. So anyway, she walks into the doctor's office with me, and my doctor says to her, oh my gosh, I love your hair, and you have cancer. That's not exactly how it happened, but it kind of happened like that. Like, the doctor really did compliment her on her hair right before she told me I had cancer. Anyway, yeah, so this is January 23rd, 2017. And then a month later, I was booked for surgery for my lumpectomy. On my 46th birthday, I went in for surgery. So, you know, some people are like, God, that was like the worst birthday ever. I'm like, no, this is the best birthday ever. I'm like, get this thing out of me, get it out. And so, you know, it's very fortunate. I was caught early, and so they thought they got most of it really through the surgery. And so then it was just a bit of a waiting game for the next couple of months as they tried to figure out what would be next. Like, for sure there was going to be radiation. I'm also taking tamoxifen, which I actually had started even before the surgery. And then there was a chance that I might have chemo. And so they did this test. And anyway, the results came back, and the chemo would be more for a preventative measure. And they came back, and my oncologist was like, yeah, so your results are not super clear. It's kind of 50-50 whether or not you should have the chemo. So it's your decision. And I was like, oh my gosh. So that was probably the hardest moment, even harder than hearing the diagnosis, is deciding whether or not I should have this treatment, which, you know, I know to be really like awful. And so anyway, long story short, I didn't end up having chemo, but I did have radiation that summer. So I was off work for that summer. And yeah, I'm happy to say that it's been all clear since then. So
right on. So did you have, were you triple positive or triple negative, or what was your pathology?
Yeah, I don't even know if I was any of those things. It's terrible. I don't even know.
Well, you would know if you were either of those things. You would have known.
Yeah, so I don't think I was either. And so I don't think I was.
Yeah, you're probably simply the estrogen, like ER/PR positive.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm not a doctor. I mean, this is what I know to be. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But, you know, I know that my friends that are triple negative, I have several, and I was triple positive, and it was a very clear distinction because I had Herceptin, a different kind of chemo, specifically because of the HER2 positive protein in my tumor. So, yeah. So you had a lumpectomy and radiation and tamoxifen.
Yep.
Yeah. And how's the tamoxifen working for you?
It's actually been okay. I mean, I know some people, I think yourself included, right, had some pretty not great reactions to it, but it's been pretty unintrusive for me.
That's
like in a lot of ways, it's so weird, you know. I mean, I for sure, like when I finished all my treatment and everything and I went back to work, like there was definitely some stuff that I hadn't really processed yet emotionally. And I'm doing it again right now, but I feel like in a lot of ways my case was as kind of clear cut, I guess, as could be. And I don't want to diminish, the fact that I went through it, because it was still worse. But I think, you know, because I also know many other people who've been diagnosed, and yeah, you know, when you hear their stories, I'm like, whoa, I feel not lucky. Well, yeah, lucky. And, you know, I know that it could have been a lot worse. So I'm very grateful.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've read on my website, I have The Tale of the Mountain Lion. Have you read that yet? I've got
I
this.
haven't read it yet.
I have this great analogy story on that came out actually, somebody that was in a group that I was in when I was in treatment back in 2015, that came to that. And it's like, basically it's, you know, that you open the fridge and, oh my God, there's a mountain lion and it starts chasing you. Right. So this is what it's like to have cancer. And there's a part in it where it's like, you know, you're looking around and some people have like a 3-legged, you know, wimpy mountain lion. And some people have like one with tyrannosaur, like the, you know, saber-toothed tiger type of mountain lion. Then you're like, but who cares? Because nobody wants to fight a mountain lion. But you have those feelings of, you know, mine is better, worse, like as if there's some sort of sliding scale. There is no such thing. There is no such thing. Everybody's experience is totally different, whether it's like the saber-toothed tiger mountain lion or the, you know, house cat. It sucks.
Yeah, it did suck for sure. I was like, you know, life was sort of put on hold, and I think we chatted a little bit last week, but I tell you, this time that we're in right now, this COVID-19, physical distancing, everyone staying separate, but like the feelings that I had during my cancer experience are kind of the same right now. Like, it's like we've all been diagnosed with something, and every day there's new information and you have to process something new every day. And some days are good and some days you're like, whoa, you're just like super emotional and you don't really know why. And like, yeah, it's weird. It feels exactly the same to me almost as that time.
I totally agree with you. And there's actually quite a few articles going around the internet about that, about, you know, people that have been through some sort of trauma or diagnosis like this and going, wow, okay, so now everybody else gets to feel what it feels like. But also, wow, I'm reliving this all over again. And, you know, we've got some experience in how to manage that, but it doesn't mean we've mastered it by any stretch. So
no.
Yeah. I have a couple girlfriends that have been through treatment that are really feeling that, you know, that it's like the Groundhog Day piece with a whole new layer to us.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So at some point, and we'll come back to that because I think that's a really great point for the conversation, given the times that we're in. But at what point did you realize, let's go back to like pre-COVID. At what point did you realize that you no longer wanted to do what you were doing before you got sick, like your HR position?
Yeah. You know, I think if I'm really honest, it was probably just before I got sick, ironically. And then of course I got sick and that just all got put on hold. And I would say then probably it took me, because I wrapped up my treatment in the summer of 2017. It probably took me almost a full year to kind of start feeling ready for something. And I actually, what had happened, I forgot to mention this in my What About Me, but a couple of friends and I started a podcast of our own called Don't Be a Jerk at Work. And we started it in the summer of 2018. And it was just more really a fun side project, something for us to do. And we'd recorded a bunch of episodes, weren't really sure what we were going to do with them. And then in the fall of 2018, we somehow figured out all the technology to release an episode. And we sort of almost did it without thinking. And I had this moment there when I was like, oh my gosh. Well, first I was so excited and we toasted to that. And then I was freaking out because I realized the first time in my life that I could remember in my adult life where I really put myself out there to be judged. And it was uncomfortable. And then we did it a few more times and I'm like, I kind of like this. I like this energy. I like what's coming from this. I like that we're turning HR, which can be fairly mundane, into something more interesting, learning vehicle for people. It was all about stories. And so that was probably my first kind of realized it. And then last fall, when I was just finishing up Royal Roads and feeling super overwhelmed by Royal Roads and work and everything, I had this moment, and I'd never had this thought before, where I was like, oh, surely I am meant for greater things than this. And that did it.
Love it. Love it. And I mean, I had the same thing. Like, I left my job halfway through Royal Roads, which was great timing, by the way, because I had all the coaches to help me out.
Totally.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of the times, like, I was in my position for 7 years, and I was off work for almost 3 years when I was sick, like, because I had the full shebang. And I, when I went back to work, it just felt wrong. It felt like I wasn't meant to be there, and I didn't know how to get out. And so, but of course, I'm a bit of a rebel in the way I go about things. And so I just started getting in trouble. Like, I started questioning authority, and I started balking at the bureaucracies. And that's when I realized, I wasn't being the person that I wanted to be anymore. And I didn't want to be that person. And so taking those steps, when I got myself a coach and had that, like, okay, who do I want to be? Like, what do I want out of this? And it sure as hell wasn't that. So going forward, when I started Royal Roads, it was kind of the beginning of the end for me at work. Like, I was also overwhelmed. I had a lot of things going on in my personal life as well. And it just didn't seem to go to be, it just wasn't working. And, I have this theory that if you feel like you're pushing a boulder up a hill, you're not going up the right way. And so, it was good for me. Like, to go through Royal Roads was kind of the nail in the coffin for me. Like, I really wanted out. And so that's how I, got free for lack of a better word. So, yeah. How did you feel when you had that realization that you were just meant for bigger things? Like, how did you feel? What were the initial feelings, and then the subsequent feelings?
I think for me, and a lot of what you were saying, sort of going through the whole Royal Roads, I mean, there's so much self-work in that program that it's hard not to, I think, really get to where you think you want to go. But I think once I started having this realization, I couldn't unsee it. And it was really hard for me to go back, because I think that I've had these thoughts throughout my career. I'd been with my company for 10 years. And so I had for sure thought about it from time to time, but I always would find reasons to convince myself otherwise. And especially, before I sort of go on to that realization, like, I feel like that whole time, for me anyway, when I was going through my cancer treatment, because I knew that it was going to be, I didn't sort of feel like it was going to go down a dark path. Like, I knew that I would come out of it. The whole way through, I'm like, ooh, I got to make something of this. I got to do something. I'm like, what? I'm too tired. I can't think of anything. And it's like, it was this weird pressure that I had put on myself. And I almost, like, it was so hard. Like, it did really take that full year to just kind of get myself back to feeling whatever normal really is before I could get here. And so I just want to kind of say to people, if you're sort of thinking like, and again, back to the COVID thing where people are like, ooh, write a book, do this. I'm like, you just can't, right? When you're in it and when you're processing it, you just, like, give yourself a break. Anyway, but so back to the realization. I couldn't unsee it. And I think the other thing for me was I know myself, and I'm generally kind of a pretty risk-averse human, and I have to feel very sure of decisions that I'm going to make before I make them. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be really intentional for the next year and a half or so, and just do some things, including Royal Roads, that will hopefully get me into a place where I can really make a change, because I didn't know what that change was going to be at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so tell me about your coaching business.
Sure. Well, I'm starting it during COVID-19. So
Yeah.
Um,
Great time to be
yeah,
a
so
coach.
I know. Well, actually, yeah, it really is yeah, that's a whole other story. But yeah, last November, I made the decision, gave like a lot of notice to my employer, and decided that April 1st of this year would be a great time to launch. And so actually, as it turns out, it is a great time in many ways. So I'm focusing on kind of 3 different areas. So coaching for sure, one-on-one coaching, some group coaching, but mostly one-on-one. With my podcast partners, we're launching a new initiative, which is more of a leadership development program, which is always meant to be online. And then doing some HR consulting. So kind of those 3 buckets. And yeah, just sort of getting started. I had a few clients lined up right before everything kind of went nuts out here. So I feel fortunate for that. And so I'm just getting started.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, honestly, like I say, it's a great time to be a coach. Helping people to navigate change is a big part of what we learn. Who do you want to be as a leader during this time? Particularly if you're looking at leadership. I mean, being a leader right now during COVID-19 and during, it's a total different kettle of fish than people may have been used to. I've heard it referred to as the great pause, but it's also the great reset, where it's like, okay, I now have my staff working from home. How do I navigate that? I now have, I'm not on them all day or with them all day, and making sure that people are having their needs met in a way that they still feel like valuable employees when they don't see me on a day-to-day. Navigating change as a leader or as an entrepreneur even, I think that, it's only been 6 weeks so far. And looking at this as an opportunity to say, okay, what are you going to create out of this? And looking and going, okay, well, is this what I really want to be doing? It's the opportunity of a lifetime for people to make a change if they wish. I mean, yes, it's uncertainty, and yes, there's fear, and yes, there's anxiety, but that's all stuff that we work with as coaches. So.
Yeah. And I think the other thing around coaching is, we've always been talk about coaching as, we coach the whole person. And I don't think that's ever been more true than now. And I feel like many of the people that I've been speaking with who are leaders in their respective organizations, they need a place to like put it all to. Like everyone's usual support systems are tapped out. I think sometimes to just having a sounding board that's outside of their organization is also really, really helpful right now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Totally. So I had written out a bunch of questions for you, and one was, what barriers did you encounter when you were first starting out? So given that you're just starting out, and a big obvious barrier is this pandemic, let's just skip that and look and say, what would be something that you would have wished you had known before, other than the pandemic? It's not something we had any control over.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd actually, before pandemic, I had already been thinking about what would be my barriers. And I think for me, the biggest one was going to be business development. That is talking about myself and promoting myself and doing it in a way that I felt authentic, and everything was always going to be hard. And so that's not changed, COVID-19 or not, that's still something that I really need to focus on. And the other one, which is interesting because I think it's just been heightened by this time we're in, is that I'm also quite a social person, and I like regular interaction with people, and I like collaborating with people. And so I always knew that I was going to have to combat this sort of isolation that I would feel working on my own. And so, but in my mind, I was like, okay, well, I'll make sure that several times a week I'll head downtown, I'll meet up with people that I know. Well, not happening. So, yeah. I don't really know if I answered your question there.
That's okay. It's okay. I mean, it's just conversation. So I had the same feelings when I was first starting. One of my fears was I was working in a job that was really fun and exciting. Like there was always something going on. I was a fundraiser. So there was always events. There was always activities. I was the fundraiser for the athletics department at the university. And so there was always, go, go, go. Like there was a real high expectation of excellence and, in everything that we did. But it was a fun place to be. And even the people that weren't involved in my events, I had a good time with, the people that I worked with. And that was my fear, was I was walking away from that support network, walking away from that group of fun people. But when I realized, ultimately, I remember talking to my coach. Actually, it was my alumni coach that I was working with through Royal Roads. She's like, tell me what you love about your job. And I was like, well, I love my window in my office that I can overlook the campus. I love my office, really. It's, exactly the way I want it. I have everything that I need. I like the color. I had all the, I love the people that I work with. She's like, none of this is the job. So let's look at the job. And I was like, yeah, I don't like the job. I don't. And she's like, what I realized during that was that being an entrepreneur, being on my own and having the autonomy to be intentional with the people that I wanted to be intentional with, it freed me up to be exactly that, right? Like I didn't have to interact with the idiot down the hall ever again, because there's always one. And I didn't have to do the job that, sucked the life out of me. I have now the choice to go and meet the friend at Starbucks, or to pick up, go for lunch in the middle of the day with who I want to. And what I'm finding now that I'm also at home, I actually am still getting a lot of those needs met by this, like doing things like this, doing my interviews, I set up every morning, I have an accountability group. We meet by Zoom every morning. So it's like my mastermind group. We meet every day at 9, and it makes me get up and have a shower and put my makeup on, because we have a Zoom call at 9 every day.
Nice.
And that fills my need for connection and contribution. And that's, I think, what's keeping me sane right now. It's not, given that I'm not going out. There is a Starbucks I can go drive through but what I'm finding is I don't really even like it.
Yeah.
Like it's really, the culture of Starbucks has nothing to do with the taste of their coffee.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you. Thank goodness for technology. And, I was just thinking again a little bit more about your last question about what do you wish that you would, known. And I think what I wish that I'd known, or what I'm really learning now, is that it's never too late. And like, I can think of so many times along my life, even back to my teenage years, and I'm like, oh, I'm too old to do this. And I'm like, I was 17, and wishing that I had learned to do something when I was 5 or something like that. And so you can always look back and wish that you had done something sooner. And I think, maybe that was the lesson for me, because now I'm here and I've done it. And I'm like, oh yeah, really, it's true. It's never too late.
Well, and so random question, what did your parents do growing up?
My dad was in real estate when I was really young, but then he took over his dad's business, which was a travel agency. So that's what he did for my whole life. And then my mom would stay at home and then she worked for my dad for a while, and then she ended up working like in a data center. Like they weren't big career people, but they had jobs. And so, yeah, when I told them that I was quitting my job to start my own business, my mom was like, what if you can't find clients? Like, are you sure? Why would you do this? And they've said that every time I've ever quit a job in my life. Like, why would you leave a job? So,
yeah. Well, and I think about that, like my parents, my mom at 42, so she worked, same idea. She was stayed at home with us. she had she had a business where she was selling handbags as part of, she had a store downtown for a while. But she worked for my dad, who owned the shoe store. So there was kind of the same connections and stuff. And, when she was early 40s, she went into real estate. So she reinvented herself in her 40s and became, very successful as a realtor. My dad, same thing. So he owned a shoe store for 30 years, well, a couple shoe stores for 30 years. And then when he turned, it would have been 91. I don't know, maybe, I don't know. But anyway, he went into real estate too. Well, they split up, and then she went into real estate, and then he went into real estate. So both of them had recreated themselves. But even so, they had been entrepreneurs before that. And when I started my dad was always like, I want you to get a job with a pension, with some stability, because that's what he didn't have. Right. Mm-hmm. And he and I had a great conversation when I was thinking about going into coaching. And I was like, I know that you always want me to have this stability, but I have this entrepreneurial spirit that I think I got it from you guys. Like, I'm following the same path as, creating and stepping into doing something that I want to do. And, my husband has the pension and the stable job, and he's not moving from that. That's his thing. I call him he's my rock, but I also call him my mossy boulder, because there's no change going on there. Right. So I have the freedom to be that balloon that's attached to the rock, that's kind of doing whatever I want kind of out this way. Mm-hmm. And, but I think about my parents, and I think about how I was brought up to realize that, you got to go for what you want. And, mm-hmm. I also know that, you're right. It's never too late. You can make change in your life. It's just about choice, and it's about stepping into your next version of yourself. I mean, I think there's some stat out there that people have 7 different careers in their life or something like that. And it's getting more with the millennials, how they have they're going to have I don't know, 50 from start to finish. I don't know. I don't know what the actual stat is, but it's not gone are the days when you graduated from high school and stepped into the role as an accountant, lawyer, doctor, engineer, and stayed there till you got your watch and then left. Yep. Right. And, we're in an amazing time. And that's one of the things, that's why I niched down. I specifically want to help women to get unstuck and to play bigger in their lives that way. That's my Unstuck Duck is my business. And helping people to get past that. Okay, I've been doing this for 25 years. Now, can I foresee myself doing this for another 20 years? I am slowly dying underneath my desk. And, mm-hmm. Moving forward from those places where you're feeling stuck. And, for me and for you, it took that brick upside your head, my head, mm-hmm. to make me go, wow, you know what? Life is too short to be miserable. It's too short for me to be playing by these rules that were imposed on me by somebody else. And I don't want to do it anymore. And that was my experience. But I think that, the other thing is, with 1 in 8 women in Canada being diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime. And I think it's a big sign for us to be like, okay, shake it up. What's next?
Totally. Yeah. And I would just add to that, though, for sure, the whole, life is too short or can be too short, that for sure is a message. And I think the other message that I've really just come to realize in the last several months is really, when you go through something like that, it really is a test of your own resiliency. And I think, when you see that in yourself, when you can finally notice it and appreciate it, then it just gives you so much more confidence to try other things, because you know what it's like to go through hard things, and you can come out of the other side. So I think that's also something that, you don't really know when you're in it or even right after it. But for me anyway, that's been a new realization.
Absolutely. So how do you balance, now you're cancer-free for how long now?
2.5 years, three,
Okay.
2.5 years. Yeah.
Do you still
3 years.
have
Let's say 3
fear?
years.
I'm sure you do. A fear of recurrence?
Sometimes, not always. It's, I feel like for me, it's triggered by like, if I hear other cancer stories for sure, or, especially when I hear ones that are not as good outcomes, and every now if I've got a pain in my boob or like something, I think about it, or, and every year I do the run for the cure and I think about it then. But I think I've now sort of gotten to a place where I don't, it's just maybe it's somewhere back there and something could trigger it, but I don't think about it consciously.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's been 5 years. So I was diagnosed in January 2015. So January 27th was when I got the news. And my news came, I was driving my kids to hockey practice and the phone rang. And just as I saw it come up on my Bluetooth, my son was changing the station on the radio. So hit the thing and it comes into the car. And it was my doctor saying, "Hi, Terry, I have to say your results have come back and you have cancer." I had both my kids in the car. I was in the middle of turning in an intersection. I'm like, how about, is now a good time?
Wow.
Yeah. And I'll never forget that. So there was no breaking it gently to my kids. There was no, and I remember, I pulled over and my son, I was just amazed. He pulled out a piece of paper and started writing down whatever she was saying. Like I wasn't capable of doing that, but he was 14 at the time, 15. He was 15. And we were on our way to the rink. And we got to the rink and I had my husband come out to the car and I'm like, "I need to talk to you." And he's like, "What?" He knew I'd had a doctor's appointment and, so he came out and then my son ended up going into practice and breaking his stick, which is a $250 temper tantrum, right? Just, but okay, you can have it.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And I was actually that day, I had a face care party about a week before, or 2 weeks before. And I had my story was really kind of funny. I actually I got a job in Saskatchewan. And so I hadn't told anybody at work that Jeff and I had decided we were going to move, we were going to leave at the end of the school year. We were going to go out to Saskatchewan and work out there. And so I was taking advantage of all my benefits and I was in the mode, I got my eyes checked. I got my, all things checked. We had at Christmas time, we had announced to our family that we were going on this grand adventure. We were moving to the prairies.
Wow.
And we were going to do that for my kids for their hockey. And then I got back to work and it was a Tuesday. You normally have a whole lot of meetings on Tuesday, but there was a mobile mammogram clinic came to campus and we got an email about it. And I looked at they're like, we have some more openings this morning if anybody's willing. It was literally like super fat. And I looked at my calendar and just as I did that, my meeting was canceled. So I thought, well, I'll go. Why not? I've never had a mammogram. I'm 41.
Oh my gosh.
That's how I got. Yeah. So I'd had this party the week later and I had all this health care, face care, stuff in my car. I was going to deliver it when the kids were at hockey. And so I'm in the car. I have dropped my kids off at hockey. And I'm like, you know what? Okay. And I was just reeling. Like, I'm going to go and deliver all this stuff. Like, this is how stupid, but whatever. Right. And the very first house I went to, I knocked on the door and she opened the door and she's like, "Hi." And I was like, "Ugh." And I just totally melted. And, we weren't really even friends at that point.
Yeah.
But she's now one of my best friends. So it was kind of, because she was the first person I told. So anyway, the stories, that's what I mean, is that we can, our stories, it's very vivid. And I really hope that through this COVID-19 thing, that people have, that they're going to remember, I have a fear of that. I have a fear that it'll all get swept under the rug and people will just be like, oh, well, that never actually happened, just a blip. But really, what are we learning from this? Like, where are we going with this, and that great pause or that great reset and looking and going, wow, what do I want out of this? What do I want out of this time with my family? What are they going to remember? Are they going to remember being on the PlayStation for 2 months straight? Or, are they going to remember games night? Are they going to remember mom having a meltdown because she can't get out of the house?
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting what people remember, because I think the things that you will remember, like when you think about kids, they'll remember things in a year from now, maybe like that, like, oh, PlayStation every day for 2 months. But then maybe when they're like your age, or like they have kids of their own, if that's what they end up doing, that they'll be like, wow, that was a time when our family was together all the time, and we've never had that, or something like that. And so you never know, like, what will trigger a memory in the future. But I agree with you. I hope that people remember things. Like when I was going through cancer, I actually journaled every day, from the very beginning all the way through. And I wish that it actually continued kind of like beyond treatment a bit, because that's when I was the most, like, I'd say, mentally kind of bothered by it all. Like at the beginning, when it was all physical stuff, I wasn't as emotional, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't been journaling during this COVID time, but maybe I'll start now, even though it's already been going on for several weeks. But like, I think it's going to continue on for a while more. And just, like sometimes it's hard to know what are the things that you do want to remember. And if you don't have something to refer back to, you don't know what you don't know.
I kept a blog during mine, and it was pretty raw. Like I was, I remember having I had a couple blog posts that actually went viral, which was kind of exciting, but for what it's worth. But what was kind of neat about that now is that I have a friend who's going through treatment, and she's got the exact same treatment plan as I had. And she's coming to me and asking, do you remember this? And I don't. I have no recollection, because I have, had any number of things happen between now and then. But I have, okay, let me look back. Let me see where I was at that time. Like I took a photo. I had 21 rounds of chemo. So I took a picture every time I was in the chair. And remembering where I was. Okay, so that's when I was feeling like I can tell by what, where my hair was at that point, or, oh, look, that's when I didn't have eyelashes or eyebrows. But also the comments that I would make. It's like, wow, this is getting really old. And remembering kind of where we were, like at the time where she's at right now, it was summertime for me. So I had really bad bone pain, and I would go and float in the lake. That was the only place I could get any relief, was just floating in the lake. Just being in cold water, and really cold water, was the only way that I could get it to stop. And not an option for her, which is unfortunate. But, well, it could be, I suppose. We can all make all things happen. But, it's just remembering those little details and having kept a memory of how I was feeling. And it's funny, I've had a couple people reach out about being interviewed on this, since I ran a Facebook ad looking for people. And most of them are people that are just, still in treatment. And I'm like, I know that what you're going through is valid. I know you want to talk about it. That's awesome. You have another year. There's a whole other year between now and how you're going to feel when you get to that stage. Like, when you're going through cancer treatment, for me, going through that radiation, bang, 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 all the different things. And then when they finally say, okay, you're done, we'll see you in 6 months, or we'll see you in a year. And it's like, what? And that's when the inner work starts to really work, when you're not in that safety net.
Yeah. And I didn't realize that in the moment. Like, no one really told me that was going to happen, or I hadn't sought out any resources really. Like, I didn't really want to hear other people's stories in the moment. I was sort of focusing on me. But you're right. As soon as the physical stuff is done and you're just like, nobody's doing anything anymore. I'm just like, what? There's a lot. Yeah, there was a lot to process. And, you know, I ended up talking to one of the psychologists at the cancer agency, and she was after the fact. And I was just sort of commenting on, you know, like, that why the services sort of weren't promoted a little bit more early on. And I think they probably were a little bit, but not a lot. And she's like, yeah, there is a little bit of a disconnect between some of the services, like within BC Cancer. But then she also was saying that, you know, a lot of times too is that you only can process so much at a time. And I'm like, yeah, that's true actually, because it was like surgery information, maybe there'd be chemo, probably radiation, but I'm not even going to look at what that looks like until I know that it's a possibility. And then you sort of just took each bit at a time. But yeah, to your point though, I think you're right. It's still like at least a year after, and depending on how severe I think the case was, or what else is going on in your life. Like, you know, you had kids, I don't have kids. You know, I think, like, I can't imagine, you know, having to be a parent. And, you know, again, I'm going back to all these like parallels of COVID. It's just like, you know, these people that are parents or leaders or whatever, and you have to show up in a certain way, but you're feeling all the feels of what you're also going through, and it's hard. And so,
yeah, it is. And, you know, as a parent during the COVID thing, you're also dealing with the disappointments for the kids. Like, my youngest is graduating in June, and he goes to private school in Saskatchewan. He plays hockey out there. So he got sent home for spring break, or actually it was before spring break. They kind of said, you know what, we're going to shut the school down. And so go and you can do your homework from home. Like, they have tablets. So he's still going to school all through this, which is great. But, you know, those kids go to that school from all around the world, and they're not going to be coming back for graduation in June. And he'll never see them again. And that is so devastating for him. Like, you know, all his stuff is still out there. He only brought home what he had for the spring break. He hasn't got all his stuff yet. He still has all his clothes. They're all still out there. Yeah. His shoes, his runners, like all the things, his hockey gear, it's all still out there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And, you know, that's the thing, is that we think about, there are so many parallels. Like, you know, when I left my job to go have surgery for the first time, I had 6 surgeries in total. So my first surgery was a lumpectomy, and they called me in on a cancellation. So I didn't have time to lay everything out for whoever would possibly take over my job, which didn't happen for another 9 months, because they didn't know when I was going to be back.
You
know, just there's a lot of stuff like that going on right now, where things are just on hold. It's like a pause. Yeah. It's just a big pause. Yep. So definitely. So when so I think if you were, okay, so back to the pivoting, because would you consider yourself to be thriving now? Or at least more fulfilled?
I think so. I made the decision to do what I want to be doing, and I'm, you know, even though it's new, yes, I would say yes.
Okay. So if you were to give another piece of advice to a cancer survivor, or someone who's currently even in treatment but is feeling stuck, what would you say to them?
I think that, we've already alluded to it a little bit, but I think that I would say, you know, adjusting to whatever your new normal is or your situation, it takes time, and to give yourself permission to figure it out as you go, and not expecting perfection, but just, it's a journey, and doing it, but just knowing that it's going to take time.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so tell us a bit about your coaching practice, what you are doing now, and where people can find you.
Sure. Yeah. So coaching, I mean, I'm doing it all over Zoom, so it's working out well. My website is www.sandygunn.ca. But you can also find me on our podcast website, which is don'tbeajerkatwork.ca. And it's also on Apple Podcasts and Google and Spotify too. So I'm in both those places.
Awesome. I actually really want to look that up. I totally do.
Yeah, if you've got some stories, send them my way.
I have stories of not only dealing with jerks at work, but being a jerk at work.
Totally. Yep. And you know, I mean, for us, we use jerk. It's one of those things. It's you know, we don't really think that most people mean to be jerks, but sometimes inadvertently through our behaviors or what we say, that's just what happens. And so,
yeah. I think a lot of the time it's simply that people aren't getting their needs met. You know, their driving needs met, the stuff that feeds them. Like for me, my number one, I have my top two are like autonomy is one of my driving needs. So if I'm not getting that need met in a constructive way, I'm going to get it met in a destructive way. Right? I'm going to get it
very
met
self-aware of you. Very self-aware of you, Carrie.
Yeah,
very
contribution is another one. Contribution is another one for me. So I like to make a difference, and hopefully it's not in the way that I'm making an impact in a negative way.
Nice. Well, I feel like what you're doing, this whole series is a real contribution, and I can't wait to listen to all of your interviews.
Yeah, every one of them has been different. It's been really neat. Some of them are like really emotional for me. So thank you very much. I appreciate very much you coming on board, and I look forward to sharing this with the world. So,
thanks, Carrie.
You're welcome.